Hey. Hi, guys. Welcome back to The Independence. I am streaming on X, on Facebook, and on YouTube Live. Clips coming out on Insta as they come out. Thank you for joining me. Today, we are going to be talking about flock. What the flock is up? So, we'll talk a little bit about the landscape, specifically here in New Hampshire, where we do have a lot of actual protections that are built in thanks to the work of free staters like me over the years. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit as well, and talk a little bit about the paradox in the libertarian world between surveillance, between privacy, between private surveillance, public surveillance, all of that good stuff. So I hope you guys will hang around for that. I will be talking to the cameras over there.
Coming to you live from the heart of the free state of New Hampshire. This is the Independence Heart. And now, your host, Carla Gericke.
Hi, guys, and welcome back to The Independence. I am your host, Carla Gericke, and today we're going to be doing a deep dive on what the flock is going on in New Hampshire. Now, of course, many of you may know that Flock is a private company that is putting up cameras all over America, and my sources, as well as a website called DFlock, have made me aware that some are going up here in the great free state of New Hampshire. And so I want us to start to really look at this topic, figure out what the landscape is here in New Hampshire, and then also I have some solutions to the problem. There'll be some call to actions at the end, but this is a topic that to some extent I've been preparing my whole life for. I brought some examples here from my office, but also it is a topic that is obviously developing real time. And so you and I, folks back home here on the internet, will be sort of learning real time, which of course really is a part of life as well. If we all waited until we were perfect at something, we would rarely get something done. So I hope you guys will stick around to cover this topic with me today. So I think at the heart of it, the question is, and has always for me been, maybe for the handful of people who don't know the sort of my backstory, but I won a big First Amendment landmark case back in 2014, which reaffirmed the right to film police officers in public. I got a close to $60,000 settlement. We took it all the way to the First Circuit in Boston, which is the court right below the Supreme Court. And in that case, the court found that, yes, of course, we have a constitutional right to film police officers in the public execution of their public duties. And if they take your camera or if they delete your footage, you actually have a claim against that department and that police officer personally, because the court found they do not have qualified immunity, meaning they're, state-owned get out of jail free card. They don't have qualified immunity in those cases. So every single person in the First Circuit, which is about 13 million Americans, have the right to film police officers and public officials in the execution of their public duties, which of course has gotten a lot easier over the years with our cell phones. Now, on top of that, so that's sort of your free speech First Amendment rights. But then we also, of course, have our Fourth Amendment rights. And the Fourth Amendment rights are the ones that say, hey, you know what? We're allowed to keep secrets from you, stinky big bro, but you're not supposed to keep secrets from us. Now, that relationship has actually been turned entirely on its head over the past 50 years or so, but it is, of course, also now severely accelerating where there is more and more and more data being collected on you. I think that one could make the argument the right to privacy is close to dead. I don't actually want to quite give up on it yet, but at a minimum, I believe that we, meaning we, the people, watch the watchers. And so who's watching us? There's the old-fashioned libertarian joke, which folks know from back home, which is, who will build the roads? And of course, that is the question that you will hear people on any side of statism, people who love big bro, just want some more of that, control and authoritarianism in their lives. The Fourth Amendment is supposed to stop them from surveilling us, but that is not what is happening anymore. Now, on top of that, we have actually a bit of a weird libertarian paradox. Now, I want you guys to sort of hang with me for this part, because it became very noticeable during COVID, where private companies and private businesses, let's say the Targets of the world, were enforcing mask mandates, right? And people would argue, oh, but they can do that. They're a private company. They can do what they want. And if you don't want to put on a mask to go to Target, don't shop there. That is an entirely principled libertarian property rights position. You're like, hey, I'm a property rights owner. This is my store. I can do what I want. And if you don't like it, you got to go somewhere else. Okay, cool. I agree. But now when they're doing something at the behest of the government, like the social media companies did during COVID mania, where they were censoring, i.e. violating our First Amendment rights, on behalf, the private companies were doing it on behalf of the government. And when we start to see that collusion and that marrying between corporations and big brother, big government, so big tech, big pharma, big war, big agriculture, big sugar, big poison is really what this little pool is here. When whatever the big business is, i.e. the monopolies that are being protected by the state, big brother, get together and they collude, we actually definitionally can call that fascism. That is actually the marrying of state and private interests. So, is that what's happening with a company like Flock? Let's see if we can figure it out. So Flock is a private company. Flock is putting up cameras all over America. And here's the part I find the most horrifying is they run on solar panels. Now, I don't know if you guys remember the plot of the start of The Matrix, but there was this thing that happens, and the thing that actually had happened is that the robots ran on solar, so when the war started, it could never end because everything was just running off solar power, so there was like no literal off switch. So let's start with, we are putting in what can be called, honestly, surveillance capitalism that has no off switch. That's kind of where we're at. So the companies are putting these up, private companies, back to our Target example. So I believe there is actually one in a Target. I believe there's some going up in Hooksett. I believe there's some going up in other places here in New Hampshire. But these private companies are putting them on their private property. So again, technically, yes, that is a private property rights argument. They should be allowed to do that. But here's the reality. Those cameras are looking out on other parts of the public space. So maybe you're looking out across the parking lot, but then you happen to also see cars coming in and out, or you can see the cars going down on the street down below. So now you actually technically are surveilling beyond your property itself. Now, on top of that, what is happening? So you're not just surveilling private property, you're surveilling public space. You are also, if you're a company like Flock, you are now selling that data, which they call sort of behavioral capital. They are selling that to various other companies so that people can be like, hey, we want to know more about how people move around, or whatever. They're like the little nuance of what they're trying to figure out of what we're doing, right? But also, they are selling that data to police departments and to other government agencies without warrants in many cases, and really without probable cause even, right? So this is a problem, because what have we done? We have now basically created a pipeline where we're arguing as libertarians, cool, they should be able to put up the surveillance cameras because they're putting it on private property, but also, hey, we're letting the government buy this information, circumvent the Fourth Amendment, and are using it as dragnets, as information now. But of course, the concern is down the line, what are they going to use this for? And for civil libertarians like me, or people who are into civil liberties and have been working on this issue really for my entire life, the question becomes, what should we be doing now so that we don't literally usher in a panopticon? So the good news is New Hampshire actually has some very choice laws here that actually I worked with Neil Kirk on many moons ago. It works together with this privacy amendment. We put in a constitutional amendment that was passed here in New Hampshire, Article 2B of the New Hampshire Constitution, which says our right to privacy is inherent. And I think we are going to have to rely on that together with these other laws that we have implemented over time, and that actually, to Kelly Ayotte's credit and to the Republicans up there at the State House, we actually were going to sunset this year, specifically the license plate readers, which is illegal in New Hampshire. License plate readers are illegal in New Hampshire. We are going to have to take that bill, which was supposed to sunset this year, which is now not going to sunset, thank you. And we need to take the constitutional amendment, plus that bill, plus some 91As, plus an appetite between all of us to decide, hey, this is not culturally the kind of place we want in the free states. And then we're going to have to deflock. And I can see how that one could become flocking hard to say. All right, so let me tell you guys about a little bit about what Flock is, right? So Flock isn't just safety tech. So this is the way they sell us, right? So they'll say to us, hey, we need to be able to surveil because, hey, we can catch child traffickers, we can catch missing persons, we can catch bad guys, we can catch robbers, and all of those things are true. The question becomes, how do we balance what could be good outcomes with things that could be very, very bad outcomes, meaning actually that we create a digital prison planet where your movements are constantly surveilled, and you start with surveillance, but the knock-on from that, of course, is control, and then it's control of your movements, which means you are no longer a free human. So the business model for Flock is that they rent their cameras for about $2,400 to $2,500 each per year. So they rent the machines out, and then they have this sort of software uh, thing on top. It's a recurring revenue machine, and they're making about $300 million currently. Their customers are people like cops, HOAs, right? So you put in an HOA somewhere. You want to make sure your properties are safe. I get it. Malls and businesses. The private property part, I don't have such a big concern about. The cops and government agents, big bro, buying all our data, that's the part I have a problem with. So currently they're scanning every plate. They're building searchable databases. They're enabling cross-jurisdictional queries. And then they say things like, oh, we don't actually sell the data. We just rent access to this all-seeing network, this all-seeing eye we're now creating, right? So it's a profit center that actually turns you and me and every one of us, every free human, every granite stater into the product itself. So they're currently doing 20 billion with a ba-ba-b scans every month. And so I think we should think about this in the terms that they themselves have used for their marketing. Now, don't you find it fascinating, as I do, that they actually chose the term flock for their brand? So flock, of course, is you have a flock of sheep, right? So in libertarian circles, and certainly in other circles, political circles, I'm sure some of you may have heard the term over time, sheeple. It is an uncharitable view of just the people who kind of go along with the flow and, the people who kind of gave us COVID mania, right? So the flock of sheeple say bah, right? But we, the people, must say nah. And so I'm here to say nah to this flock model. Now, leaning into that idea of a flock a little bit is also the notion of the shepherd, right? So this is where they catch us. They create this sense where they're like, no, 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 we're the good guys. We're just going to make sure everything's cool, right? We're just observing. We're the watchers. And then again, the question becomes, who watches the watchers? Because whoever is watching, it's like, okay, they're going to be implementing behavioral science. They're going to be like, hey, we actually want people to drive less. So we're going to do this and this. Now, you know how people drive because you've been watching that parking lot at Target for like 4 years, right? So someone's buying that data and then figuring things out. So the question becomes, what are they going to do with this data, and where are we heading with this? So we fully understand that we dislike government surveillance, right? So, and we understand why we have the warrants, why we have due process. And here in New Hampshire, the RSA that you should know about is 236-130. Okay. And I have to be honest, I did not double check that number, so I hope it is right. But then we're like, okay, government surveillance bad. But then we're like, no, private surveillance, it's voluntary. But I posit that this actually gives us the worst of both worlds, right? Because the private firms now record everything in public adjacent spaces without your consent. They commodify the data, your likeness, your image, and then they hand it over to the state without the constitutional limits that they would have had if the government had installed the cameras, right? So having flock on private property is a perfect workaround that is really, really, really good for Big Bro and his cronies, but it's not so good for us over here, the sheeple, right? And so that watcher, the shepherd, I want you to think about this little statement just a little bit. So I read this once and it really struck me and I haven't forgotten it. It said, the shepherd teaches the sheep to fear the wolf, but in the end, it is the shepherd who eats the flock. And it struck me because there is a very deep truth in that. So, who in our scenario is the shepherd and what are their shears, right? So, the shepherd, of course, is the private companies that are doing this, Big Brother who's colluding with them, and we should really be skeptical about this situation that's being put in. All right, so now I want to explain a principled way forward. So many of you know that I have been working on right to know issues for many moons. Right to Know is our RSA 91A here in New Hampshire. It is similar to the FOIA documents that we know, so the Freedom of Information on the federal level here in New Hampshire, we call it 91A, Right to Know, right? So over the years, I have used Right to Know to discover many things. I have also personally been involved in a lawsuit in 2019, not the one I started the show with, in the 2014 one. I was a petitioner together with the ACLU of New Hampshire back in 2019 to block the use of surveillance cameras downtown by the Manchester PD at City Hall. Now, that one didn't actually end up really working out in our favor, but I don't know if Brandon's back there, but this is just kind of like, it tells you about the ACLU lawsuit. So we did, so the ACLU sued to block the use of the cameras downtown. The mayor wasn't having any of it, so my point just being, I've been working on this topic for a long time, and so I hope people will take seriously the recommendations that I came up with, and this sort of, I think, pretty innovative and clever play. All right, so what is the principled way forward? So obviously the answer isn't to tell private companies that we're going to ban their cameras, right? So we have to respect private property. Private property is the solution to many problems. So what we have to address is like this out of control big bro part of this, right? So if you're in this paradox where we're fighting government cameras, but we're allowing the private cameras, and now we're allowing the government to get the data. My question is, what can we do to make sure someone is watching the watchers? So here's my solution. What if for every query put in by a state agency or law enforcement officer or police department, so every state initiated query automatically at the cost of Flock and every other company that is surveilling us has to put whatever was asked for in a public ledger, a public searchable, auditable, transparent, open database that anyone in public can search. So how does that solve for problems? That actually creates a real incentive for the government only to be doing real police work, because honestly, here's what we discovered. The first cases are all things of cops stalking their exes, lunatics like figuring out, the person they want to dox or SWAT. It's not really being used for a lot of serious police work. So if we did this, basically it's the classic sunshine is the best disinfectant, right? So we wouldn't ban the technology or pretend private companies are saints, but we would force radical transparency on the back end where the real power and abuse happens. So basically, the idea is that every ALPR data platform, so anyone who's looking up license plate information or anyone who's surveilling anything, frankly, where the government has asked you for your camera stuff, all of that stuff has to be put in a searchable, auditable public database. And they have to pay for and maintain it as the cost of doing business. It is the cost of surveilling us. That means you have to add this cost as a feature as a public service nay. So we're not going to nationalize flock, but we're going to make them actually, at least do the right thing. So this would basically turn a black box query system into something closer to a public utility ledger. So in New Hampshire specifically, this would extend the spirit of RSA 261-75B, which already requires an audit trail and reporting for law enforcement LPRs. And this would layer in another protection in our system. It also closes this private property loophole, the paradox I was talking about on the query side. So i.e., even if the cameras are on private property, if they're doing public surveillance, that the servants of the public, the popo, if they want the info, then we as the watchers of the watchers also get to know what they're asking about. So here are the upsides. It's a deterrence of abuse. So officers or agencies will know that every query is public. So stalking your ex or fishing for political targets or that routine pre-crime stuff they now do becomes risky, right? Because their own misuse becomes discoverable. There's public accountability. Journalists, activists, defense attorneys, and citizens can all audit the patterns. So we could ask questions like, why did this department query 10,000 plates last year where the only reason was investigation, right? That is not a reasonably articulable suspicion, right? So then we would get data on the data. So we would create, dare I say, mega transparency, right? So we can finally see how much of Flux's million investigations helped is real policing, right? Because they're using all this language to say safety, 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 while sort of not talking about the big bro part, right? So we can test for casual overreach. There will be cost internalization. You make Flock pay. So at some stage, Flock's going to be like, hey, maybe Popo, stop giving so many requests because it's costing us a fortune to keep it in this open public database, right? So there's an actual a correct incentive loop there that creates oversight of the bureaucracy, and it's precedent friendly. So this is very sort of similar to the notion of public finance disclosures. Police body cam release policies that already exist. And it's not unprecedented to require private contractors serving public functions to open their books in limited ways. Now, of course, the popo are going to scream blue bloody murder. And so there will be tensions and things that we are going to override. I think it's strongest on a state level. So we probably don't want a federal solution. We probably want a New Hampshire first solution. And in New Hampshire, this can actually work. And so what do we need to be doing? We need to start filing more 91A requests. We need to get a group of people together. Maybe this is the mission for this year, is to figure out how to ensure that if we are enabling private surveillance in the state of New Hampshire, that we as the citizens of this state, and we as individuals, and we as self-owned humans who own our own likeness and who have a right not to be constantly surveilled as some product, that we get a say in how this data and information is going to be used. So that is my story for today. I can't believe we've already run out of time. I have a lot more to say about this topic. Please follow me on all my socials. Carla Gericke.com is where I keep all my data. You can email me at carla@carlagericke.com as well. I am going to build a little army here in New Hampshire to make sure that we do this right according to what our needs and desires are, and not that of some crazy Orwellian big brother. I wish everyone back home much love, peace, and understanding, and I will be back here again next week. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for hanging. I will see everyone back here next week. Bye.